My first involvement was when I met Prabhupada in England, in Bury Place. I was a very young, and I was all freshened up, ready to go into the evening arati. And Prabhupada wanted to see me. So I went up to his room. I was feeling very, very nervous. And Prabhupada says, I want you to go to Vrindavan to help build a temple. We want to build a Krishna Balaram temple. So I went with a devotee called Smarahari. We came to India on a one-way ticket. We arrived in Vrindavan. Smarahari went to Mayapur to serve there. I stayed on in Vrindavan. And things were very slow in the beginning. There were no funds. There was not even a concept for the temple, no design, and of course the key ingredient, no cement. So you'd think, well, how is it going to happen? How is Krishna going to help us fulfill Prabhupada's desire? So Guru Kripa Maharaj, he was given the task of going to Japan with his collecting party, the Namhata, and they would work very, very, very hard and bring a lot of money back to Prabhupada. And that was the beginning of real progress in the building of the Krishna Balaram Mandir.
As the opening was approaching, Prabhupada was on top of every detail that was going on, and he put what he considered all his best men in charge of all the different areas. They were all his GBCs, and they were all the different administrators at that temple in charge of prasadam distribution, greeting guests, cleaning the temple, whatever it was. They were just his assistants. And of course this was Vrindavan, so Prabhupada wanted everything done first class. And I remember him ringing the bell so many times during the day to get this GBC, get this one, get that one, going back, and he would be checking up to make sure that they were doing everything properly. And even receiving all of his disciples. There was nothing that escaped Prabhupada's vision, his perception. I remember him saying that all the devotees, they have to have a nice facility to stay. They should have this to eat. They have to have cow's milk, not buffalo milk. I mean, every detail Prabhupada covered. It wasn't just the installation ceremony. That also, he was taking care of that, but it was all the different details. He was always giving us the guidance, but it was clear that Vrindavan was his temple. He wanted to make that statement. It was very important that everything was done properly in Vrindavan.
We had gotten local Brahmins to install the deities because Prabhupada said that without them doing it, people wouldn't think the deities were really installed. This is Prabhupada at the installation. So at one point in the ceremony they had to bring Prabhupada out. I guess he was the yajamana, the sponsor of the sacrifice, and he had to participate in some of the rituals. You just notice how Prabhupada sits here quite, I don't know what to say, submissively enduring the ritual of the Brahmanas. He also ordered that there would be a 24-hour kirtan, and he told the devotees that the kirtan is actually installing the deities. But they're quite elaborate, the rituals. You see how they do their coconuts up the real style. Pradyumna was busy taking notes.
I've never seen a person draw something without having to erase anything. And I remember him, Surabi, he had these pencils in his pocket. And he said to me one morning, Gunanava, he says, I'm going to do the artist's conception. I'm going to draw the Krishna Balaram Mandir for the first time. I remember we were staying in these little straw-roofed huts, very, very humble dwellings. And he had a desk and a drawing board. I had an A3 sketch pad. And he opened it up and he started sketching. And his pencil never stopped. He didn't rub anything out, and it just manifested on this paper. And when he showed Srila Prabhupada that design, Srila Prabhupada beamed. I was in the room. Srila Prabhupada said, "This is wonderful." And he was so proud of it, and he was showing some guests that were also there in the room. He said, "Oh, this is going to be the Krishna Balaram Mandir."
Prabhupada was responsible for everything, and he pushed everyone to do as much as they could do, and sometimes beyond our own limits. And I remember Surabi, who was in charge of it all, had to undergo a lot of chastisement. I would be getting Surabi so many times towards the end of it, the last week, and I don't know how much sleep he was getting. I know it wasn't very much. When Prabhupada would say, call Sarabi, and he would tell him that this was wrong and that was wrong, and it was very intense.
In all those 2 years that all these temples were built, 2 or 3 years, there was always this pressure on time. It had to be done quickly. Everything had to be done so fast. And there was always delays. And that was a kind of a disappointment. I really did my best. I tried my best. And I think at times there was like an ego thing in me that I would feel that it couldn't be faster, but I could see that Prabhupada disagreed with me. And these were like moments that you probably make a lot of spiritual advancement, because you really got to face yourself. You're going to accept the fact that no, it is too slow. Even though I could have had millions of reasons why, including there was no money, including the electricity went down, there were blackouts, whatever I would come up with, it just would not register. And Prabhupada, he would not accept that. It was like, now I have to surrender. So this was like my battle of surrender. It was always like, there is a way to do it faster, and then you have to find that out.
And I remember when all the deities were standing, they weren't on the altar yet, they were on the ground with their blindfolds on, and there was this opulent sort of hut built in the courtyard with fruits and coconuts and this whole thing, and Srila Prabhupada was over talking to a few Brahmins, I think, that were over on the side, and I'll never forget this vision. He was, it was as though he was calling on Krishna to come and enter into the forms of the deities, and there was this stream of light just coming down, and his hands were up like this, and the other people were just standing there with their palms folded, and he was saying something. I couldn't hear him because I was on the other side, but I saw that beautiful vision, and then they continued with the installation of the deities.
I went to Jaipur where the deities were being carved, and I supervised the carving of the deities, especially Prabhupada, because the carvers, they were working from photographs, often not very good. And so the man who was carving Prabhupada was having a really hard time. He was so frustrated because I kept trying to show him things and point out certain things on the photograph of Prabhupada. And they had to actually redo the whole carving at one point because some spot came up on Prabhupada's head. The sculptor finally said, "Now you do it," and he left. Because I watched him, so I kind of started learning a little bit. So I took over for a little while. Finally, the day came when all the deities were finished. And I brought the deities to Vrindavan on a train, and then a Tunga, and then I took a rickshaw. This was like early in the morning, 3 a.m. or something. Just as I started entering the outskirts of Vrindavan, with all the deities in their crates, all the peacocks started crying. The hair on my head stood up from that sound. It was an amazing experience.
Nothing would stand in Prabhupada's way. This temple had to open as soon as possible. And there were many obstructions. You live in Vrindavan, you try and get things done. Everything's magnified 100 times. So if there's an obstruction, it's a big one. It's 100 times more obstructive than anywhere else in the world. But finally, through great endeavor, the day arrived.
M. Chandra Reddy was the governor of Uttar Pradesh. He comes from Andhra Pradesh originally. Prabhupada had some contacts with him. He was also a life member. Prabhupada had very specifically invited him. That was very important to Srila Prabhupada, that the governor come for the opening. And he was establishing the credibility of our movement. And Prabhupada was such a gracious host that even though he was very sick at that time, Prabhupada somehow or other completely shed all of his illness and was acting in every way as if he had had absolutely no illness. And then later in the evening he was not well again. But Prabhupada would just completely ignore his physical condition. The first artik was going to take place, and I was in the temple room, and the temple room was packed with people. And you know how it is in India, everyone was shoving each other one way. It was like an ocean of people just going from one direction to the other, and somehow or other I found myself right in the middle, and the curtains opened. I had no idea that Prabhupada was going to offer the first artik. And it was so wonderful just watching Srila Prabhupada as he was offering the articles. He was offering them with such love and simplicity.
When the curtains opened up, I was right in front of the Krishna Balaram altar. And I was so filled with ananda, just thinking of the triumph of Prabhupada and all that went into it. So just thinking of that, tears were just pouring out of my eyes. And I just wanted to stand there and watch Prabhupada in his moment of glory and relish it.
There was just one person between me and a clear view of Srila Prabhupada, and that was Tripurari Swami. So I was standing behind him, and I did everything I could think of. I held my camera in front of him. I tapped him on the shoulder. But he was just fixated on Prabhupada offering the arti.
Vishaka wanted to take a picture, and I was blocking the view. And so she's tapping me on the shoulder, which, you know, a lady wouldn't normally do that in ISKCON. And I was a sannyasi at the time, on top of the new sannyasi. And, you know, I was hearing her, but I wasn't listening.
He remained fixed in his position, and in fact just ignored me. So I became a little bit desperate, and I put my mouth next to his ear because the kirtan was very loud. And I said loudly, "If you stand there, then you can see Srila Prabhupada offering the arti. But if you let me stand there, then the whole world will see Srila Prabhupada offering the arti."
So she got to me, and I stepped out of the way, and she took a very famous picture.
Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan.
There's one part towards the end of the artik, he's offering the peacock fan. And as he looks out to offer it to the devotees, the smile on his face is unbelievable. It was like one who'd conquered the earth. He'd done it. He'd installed Krishna and Balaram in Vrindavan, and you could just read his face. It was full of bliss, full of happiness.
When Srila Prabhupada gave the lecture on the day of their installation, he gave the lecture in Hindi, so it would have been directed to the local guests. And he was begging forgiveness from all the personalities there for any offenses. And that struck me.
There were days of speeches by different God brothers and learned men of Vrindavan. In particular, I remember there was one speech given by Nrsinga Vallabha Goswami, where Nrsinga Vallabha Goswami gave extensive scriptural evidence of how persons who were not members of the Vedic culture could be elevated to the platform of Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And Prabhupada was quite pleased with that speech. It was given in Hindi, but Prabhupada gave a summary afterwards.
And the other thing I'll never forget is the quantity of pink rose petals. And there was this like abundance of pink rose petals that you were actually kind of up to our ankles on the floor. It was so special. After Mangalati, we were all making garlands for Krishna and Balaram. And one day there were lots of broken flowers left that couldn't be used for the garlands. So I had them all in the sheet that we'd been using on top of the floor to make them in. And I took them and I showered them over Srila Prabhupada from the balcony in the guest house. And then he gave this instruction that we shouldn't waste the flowers. Srila Prabhupada was very conscious, in India particularly, of wasting the money. He knew how to protect the flowers so they'd stay fresh for longer. He told us to wrap them in damp cloths and hang them in a cold place. He knew everything about flowers, it seemed to us. But also he didn't want us to waste. Even though, practically speaking, the flowers couldn't be used, he still wanted to teach us not to waste. And he considered that showering flowers on him like the demigods in the heavenly planets a waste of flowers. So I never did that again.
The Vrindavan project was actually the very first real temple in ISKCON. This established Prabhupada so much in Vrindavan. I think he felt very good about that. Because actually Bombay was started earlier, but it was stopped because of the court cases. And I think at that time he was trying to get Bombay first. And then everything was blocked there. And Mayapur was a long-term project. It wasn't so urgent. And then Vrindavan became priority. So it only took about 2 years to build Vrindavan. Less than 2 years. Most ashrams and temples, they went very slow. When money came there, they would build something. And ours went very fast, very quickly done. And that was the same in Bombay, actually. Of course, Vrindavan had beautiful buildings, very classic buildings, but the standards were not very high in most of them. They were sort of run down a little bit, they were dark inside, and they didn't have much life, actually. And then this one was just so clean and fresh and lively, and there was just, everything was beautiful in there. And that's what people felt also when they would come to the temple. It sort of woke up Vrindavan.
There was a parade, quite an elaborate procession through the streets of Vrindavan. There was an elephant, there was a Shanai band, and all the devotees doing kirtan. It was quite a commotion with all of this procession going through. Prabhupada seemed to be very beaming and happy. He was walking at the head of the procession. And which, now that I think of it, must have been quite funny for people who knew him from before. And here he is with an elephant, a Shanai band, and all these Western disciples walking through the streets where he had walked so many times as a sadhu. And we walked quite a ways. It seemed like a very, very long walk through the city.
The procession, it was like something out of the Bhagavatam. Decorated cows and bulls, brass bands, drums, kirtan parties, thousands of people. Residents came out of their homes, their businesses, as Prabhupada walked by, offering him water, flowers, and similar gifts. I remember that day I heard that Prabhupada wasn't well. The devotees wanted him to sit on a palanquin. It was a very long procession, but he refused. He walked the whole way.
They had a Rath, because that's the tradition, there's a Rath and the spiritual master rides on the Rath, and then there's a procession. And there were hundreds of devotees. And at one point, Prabhupada decided he wanted to get off the Rath and walk with us. So when he did that, everyone just wanted to come and touch Prabhupada's feet at the same time, especially the Indian-bodied people who would come to the festival. So immediately, I think it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was there, he organized us into human chains. We locked arms on either side of Prabhupada. So we went along the procession like that, keeping people from, crushing Prabhupada. During that procession, at times we would be farther away from Prabhupada, and at times we would be closer to Prabhupada. The farther away you got from Prabhupada, it was like being in a hurricane. It was just chaos. And as we came closer to Prabhupada, it got calmer and calmer and calmer, until when we were right next to Prabhupada, it was like we were in the eye of a hurricane. I mean, it was so calm and serene, and Prabhupada was just emanating this ecstasy. And it was a stark realization, the consciousness that the empowered pure devotee had. He could change the atmosphere, not just in a room where everything was organized perfectly, but he could change the atmosphere anywhere. Prabhupada designed Krishna and Balaram deities, the mudra. He made a drawing, gave it to Bhardraj to have it made in Jaipur. There's no Krishna Balaram deity like this, with Balaram resting his arm on Krishna's shoulders. There's no deity like that. Prabhupada made that design. And then he would joke about it. Who is stronger, Krishna or Balaram? Bala means strength. He's the strong one. And everyone would say, Balaram. And then Prabhupada said, then why Balaram is resting on Krishna? This means Krishna is stronger.
So the bank was right under the guest house. That's actually where Prabhupada's room is now, where we have Bhagavad Gita class. They opened a bank, and all the devotees crowded in, and Prabhupada was inside, and he was inaugurating the bank. And he told this joke. I was craning through the little screen window to hear what he was saying. He said, so one man heard that money attracts money. So he went into the bank and he put his money on the counter. And the teller took his money and put it in the till and said, yes, can I help you? And the man said, well, I heard that money attracts money. So I put my money there. And he said, yes, but our money has attracted your money. And Prabhupada laughed, and everyone laughed. And that was his joke that he told.
There was one morning walk after the installation, and the temple was beautiful. And it looked so beautiful. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, and he said, Prabhupada, Surabi has really done a wonderful job. And Prabhupada kind of chuckled and he said, yes, everyone is saying Surabi has done so nice. He said, but as all I do is chastise him. He said, but that's my duty. I'm his spiritual master. And when he said that, all the ideas I had about, I used to think, poor Surabi, and you just could understand. Prabhupada was always pushing us. And if we were able to, handle that and deal with it, you could make so much advancement in Krishna consciousness. Because with this pushing, always came a lot of blessings. Whatever we could do was because of Prabhupada's blessings.
The next day, I was on Prabhupada's morning walk on what was then Chatikara Road, which at that time, of course, was really just a dusty road through a largely uninhabited, undeveloped region of Vrindavan, with woods and fields on both sides. And Prabhupada that morning was, again, very much pleased. He'd worked so hard to establish the temple and install the deities, and now it had come off. And Prabhupada recalled how he pushed the devotees. He said, I was practically whipping them. Then he began telling how Krishna was flattering Balaram. And my dear brother, all of these trees are bending down to offer you their obeisances. And these bees, they're all great sages who are coming to you for your association. In that way he began describing that pastime. And then he said how Gaur Nitai and Krishna Balaram are non-different. There's no difference between Krishna and Balaram and Gaur Nitai. He said, so if you ever have any difficulty, you can go before Gaur Nitai or Krishna Balaram and say, sir, this is the problem, and they will do the needful.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
That was just a wonderful victory for Prabhupada at the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple. A great triumph over over many obstacles. In all of the temples in India, the principal temples that Prabhupada opened, Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Bombay, he struggled. In Mayapur, he struggled with his own godbrothers. And in Bombay, of course, he struggled with the tenants, the municipality, and in Vrindavan, he struggled with the Goswamis, and so all of them were a great victory. But I think Vrindavan was the greatest victory, and it was the homeland of Prabhupada, as he said, my place of worship is Mayapur, my office is Bombay, and my home is Vrindavan. So it was a great triumph, and we all felt it. And from there, he built a bridge across the whole ocean to the whole rest of the world, that people could easily walk over that and enter into Vrindavan. He gave life to the whole of Vrindavan, actually, enthusiasm for Krishna Bhakti. Even those who had opposed him in some way, recognizing, yes, you're a hometown boy, and you've made us famous all over the world, and you've brought Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission everywhere, and it was like formally really recognized by the town of Vrindavan. I remember at the time there were 6 Brahmin boys that were initiated from Brahmin families in the Braj. It was a big thing for a Brahmin boy to be initiated by Prabhupada and be in a movement where they would eat chapatis cooked by persons born in the West and so forth. It was a huge triumph for Vaishnavism over religion, experiential, spiritual life over religion, Vaishnavism over Brahmanism. One of the causes that Prabhupada championed his whole life.
We were on the list for second initiation in Vrindavan. So that was very exciting, because the first initiation that we had in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada wasn't able to be there, and we were initiated by his older disciples on his behalf at the time. But this time we were getting personally second initiation from Srila Prabhupada, so that was very exciting. We had the ceremony, and then we lined up outside his quarters and were to go in one by one to get the Gayatri mantra. I didn't have a lot of money at the time, so I didn't really have any money to offer. So I went and got a big papaya. I thought, well, I'll offer him a fruit that he can have for breakfast or something. And I remember going in, I offered my obeisances, and I was just extremely nervous. Didn't know what I was supposed to say or anything. I just said, Jai Srila Prabhupada. And then he was sitting on the other side of his desk with his knee propped up. It was very warm, already in April. And he had on his sannyasi top. And he patted the floor beside him, sort of like saying, come on over here, like calling his little dog. So I went scampering over and was sitting right next to him. And I remember being really nervous, but I wanted to be sure that I pronounced the Sanskrit nicely. Maybe I was even a little proud, because Jayadwaita once had told me that my pronunciation was very nice in Sanskrit, probably from my German background. So he would point to one word after the other, and I would repeat. And I was trying to do it really nice. I have to impress my teacher. I felt so foolish and arrogant and foolish all at the same time. Then he says, do you know how to count? And I said, yes, I've been watching the devotees for the past years doing their Gayatri. And I thought, gee, I should really have an intelligent question to ask, but of course I couldn't think of anything. I was just sort of dumbfounded. But I just remember feeling so much kindness and love. Just so simple and practical, and I just paid my obeisances and left.
This is early morning, after the morning program. I was very amazed to get initiated on that day, and Prabhupada actually turned to Prabhupada and said, this boy actually is too young to be initiated. I was only 9, and he didn't say anything. So Prabhupada looked at him and says, never mind. And then he asked for the principles, and I wanted to tell Prabhupada the regular principles in English. I was studying them during the initiation ceremony. So I told him 2 of the principles in English, and the other 2 I got stuck. And my teacher, Prabhupada Prabhu, he was behind Prabhupada. He was trying to encourage me. He said, don't worry, tell him in Bengali, the other 2. This is me. If you look carefully, I didn't have a Sika because the barber in Mayapur, a couple of days before I arrived in Vrindavan, he by mistake cut all the hair off. I didn't have any Sika, and all the devotees have Sika, and they were making fun of me, and I look at Mayavadi. And Bhagavananda fired the barber because he forgot to save me a Sika. So anyway, Prabhupada didn't mind. He didn't say anything. And Prabhupada was quite pleased at that time. He saw in my face that I was trying to tell him the regular principles in English to please him. And he smiled and then he gave me the beads.
The installation of the deities was in Ram Nomi. And then the initiation ceremony took place on Balaram's Ras Purnima, April 21st, which was 5 or 6 days later. After the Hyderabad Pandal, we were headed from Hyderabad to the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And a whole bogie was reserved for the devotees. So it was all just devotees in the train. And there was one Indian sadhu sitting on his suitcase by the bathroom. And he didn't really mix with any of the other devotees. Mostly they were just Western devotees, a few Indian devotees like Haridas. And I was really wondering whether he was part of our group or not. He was very quiet and very patiently sat on his suitcase by the bathroom the whole way to Vrindavan. And then during the festival, although there was a moratorium on sannyas, the devotees had gone to Srila Prabhupada and asked if Tripurari could take sannyas. And Prabhupada said yes. And they said when? And he said, well, he can take now. So along with Tripurari, one other devotee took sannyas, and his name was Gaur Govinda. And then when he was there, I saw that this is the same devotee that was sitting very quietly by the bathroom, coming from Hyderabad to Vrindavan.
I was serving at the Montreal Temple, Canada, and there was a lot of devotees going to India, and before we left, I went back home to Los Angeles where my parents lived to give them a visit. And as I was leaving there, my mother asked me, out of the blue, she said, is there something I can give to you to take to your spiritual master? And I was really taken aback by that question, and I went, oh, that's so nice. And I said, I don't know, what would you like to give him? And she said, I could make him some guava jam, because we had fruit trees at the property. So I told her that would be really nice. And so she made the guava jam, and she wrote on there for Srila Prabhupada. And when I was in Vrindavan, I went up to Srila Prabhupada's quarters and handed it through to one of his servants. And that was that. And then I found out for 2 days the Prabhupada servant was looking for me. He had remembered what I looked like, but he didn't know my name. Finally he found me, and he said that Srila Prabhupada really loved the jam, and he wanted my mother's name and address because Srila Prabhupada wanted to write her a thank you letter. There it was. I mean, all these devotees, huge event, the opening of the temple, the installation of the deities, and Srila Prabhupada was so concerned to write a thank you letter. So my parents received a letter from Srila Prabhupada, and he was thanking my mom so nicely for this guava jam. And he told her that it was his favorite jam and that his mother used to make guava jam for him. And then he went on to say that, do not worry about your daughter. I am taking care of her. She is nicely engaged in the Lord's service. It was just a really sweet letter. It's just so amazing that Srila Prabhupada took that time to recognize just that little gift from my mother in amongst so much activity going on and so many devotees.
How was it before?
Well, we used to do it every Monday instead of Bhagavatam class, following Srila Prabhupada. I just remember being like so freaking ecstatic. It still is.
Just like this, but on the projector?
Yeah. Yeah, projector.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish we could just do it.
We usually do the classes, the Prabhupada gives the class.
Yeah.
The thing, Mondays we're so tired that it's hard for a lot of us to stay awake or something.
Yeah, I think following Srila Prabhupada is like more engaging to the mind with picture also. Picture and audio.